This month is Giant June. All month long, we're going to be talking giants. That's right, you heard. Nephilim, baby. Who are they? What are they? Where did they come from? Do they still exist? Why don't we see them anymore? Can they be saved? Are they even human? All this and more on Giant June month. Stay tuned, dark web theologians and four dragon friends.
A podcast that confronts taboo topics that most churches and Christians want nothing to do with. My name is Ricky Lee, and my co-host is Shelley and Ricky. From portals to other dimensions to Nephilim, aliens, gods, and anything else supernatural, we seek to reveal the deep underbelly of evil to give glory to our sovereign creator, Jesus Christ. Let's challenge our notions of reality and shatter our own paradigms. This is the Christian Theological Dark Web Podcast. Hey!
We're recording.
Good evening! Live and in charge from Shelley's house.
Hi guys, look!
Here we are.
It's Shelley and the guest, Ricky.
Mm-hmm.
At least I can point this way because it's real life.
Right? Is this the real life? Okay.
That's such a bad song.
Oh, I like that song.
He's
It is
talking
sad.
about the selling a soul to the devil.
Well,
I
6 to
just
1,
killed
half
a
a dozen the
man
other, you know.
So it's sad.
Queen is good. Anyway, that's not what we're going on. Guys, today we are talking about
Gigantus.
Giganticus. We're talking about giants today. Everybody loves us to talk about this topic. And this month of June, which I'm going to be trying to put these episodes out one after the other, this is going to be Giants Month. And I'm going to tell you guys a little bit about why. Shelley kind of knows why, right? Shelley gets the whole jive. But last year we made a shirt, and we're bringing it back into production, by the way, if you would like to get one for yourself, which is
Nuke the Nephilim.
Nuke the Nephilim.
Pride Month.
That's right. Now, let me explain this, because some people were like, you can't have Pride Month with Christianity. I'm like, that's the point, dude. So instead of celebrating Pride Month as it's normally celebrated, we should remember what the actual rainbow was made for in the first place. God was honoring his promise that he wasn't going to have to wipe out the Nephilim or humanity the way he did the time before. In fact, we'll get into this in a little bit. But the idea is there was no humanity left to not have to wipe out. That's why he wiped it all out in the first place.
There's a mere 8 humans.
Imagine. And then
8 out of probably a couple million people by that time.
Unless you subscribe to the weird view that Ham's wife had the DNA. I also
I super don't. Like, God's going to spend all this time making the right uncorrupted animals go to the ark, but somehow some little chick just squeaks in. I don't think so. I think there were further incursions.
You know who didn't make it onto what animal didn't make it onto the ark?
No.
The goat.
One?
You know why?
Why?
Because God's the goat. Okay, so
Been a day of dad jokes.
Yeah, well,
here.
we're here together at Shelley's
We
house,
are,
so
which
there's
is
that.
super great.
So we're gonna have that shirt out this month. If you'd like to get one, pick one up and let people know why this June is Giants Month. Then go do that. June for Giants.
The Giants of June.
Giant June.
Bum, bum, bum.
I like it. Giant June. June Giants. I dig it. So if you would like to give us a holler back. We did have a shop, but we're setting it back up. I'm going to have that in the next few days. That's an easy thing to do. So holler at us.
Absolutely.
Holler at us. We'll be posting a little bit about that.
You're going to find us looking at one another because we're actually live.
It's weird.
Sharing one camera, sharing one microphone.
Yeah.
So we'll see if we hear, it was very hard to hear you. Here.
Well, it is what it is. We'll be talking about giants, like I mentioned today. And I think we're going to spend this whole month really breaking this down. Some of this is going to be just from a biblical perspective, what giants are. Really, that's kind of what we're going to cover today.
Right.
Which, both of us.
Such a big topic.
It's such a big topic in the month of June. So we we wanted to break down what that was because we kind of broke it down a long time ago, but
Yeah.
really we sort of mixed that in with who the Watchers were. And the Watchers are completely distinct from who the Giants
Oh
are.
yeah,
They are
Watchers are angels,
totally different.
predominantly fallen.
Mhm.
I think we can say that. I don't know about 100%. If I think,
I don't think so.
I just kind of see it as the Watchers were the class of angelic beings assigned to the little green and blue marble.
Fair enough.
You know?
Yeah. They weren't watching Jupiter, that is to say.
No, they
and-
weren't hanging out on Mars.
And if you subscribe to the flat Earth, then they were looking in from the dome, like, hey, what are we doing?
It's like a reverse fishbowl.
Yeah.
The
We
reverse
can't-
fishbowl
We can't get in.
view.
So, without further ado, we want to start just at the beginning, man, and break this down and talk about some different classes of giants and stuff like that that we find in the Bible. And then as weeks progress, we'll probably start looking at if we can find some ancient or even more modern writings, which you actually already
Right.
found some really cool
Right.
examples here in the US, here in the States, that are very clearly
There's so
giant reference.
many.
Yeah. There's a book I want to buy. I can't remember even the name right now, but it's a guy that literally just did nothing but research on giants in America. So really cool. Really
There
cool.
was one. Oh, come on. I wrote it down.
While she's doing that, did you guys know that Abraham Lincoln talks about giants?
He
Just saying.
does. He is on the record for that. It's called Giant. It's called Giants on Record
Is that the name of the book?
by Jim Rivera and Hy Newman.
I think that's the one I want to buy.
That's the one I wanted to buy too.
Oh,
That's
cool.
the reason it's written down on
Hey,
the back of
I
my
wrote it-
sticky
I wrote it
note.
down and then I lost. I make multiple like lists of books I'm going to buy and then I lose them.
I have I sticky note stuff so much. Like when I'm listening to something at work, here is just a small bit of some of my sticky notes of things that I want to research
So,
more or books I want to get into.
If you guys want to send us a gift for whatever reason, just ask if, what book we want to read or buy.
Right? Which books don't you have yet?
Which one are you looking at? So we'll start from Genesis 6. In fact, actually, let's back up a little bit, right? Genesis 3:15. That's the best place to start. So,
my favorite.
yeah. It's Marzulli's favorite as well, by the
Is
way.
it?
It's what he calls the seed war. And I think aptly put, when the rupture between heaven and earth for the humans happens, it's in the Garden of Eden, right? And in Genesis 3:15, we see that that God tells us when he puts enmity between the serpent and the seed of the woman, the seed of the serpent and the seed of the woman, right? That there would be this enmity there. And so that's where this whole thing starts. Now, you're going to get some people that are going to tell you that's symbolic and blah, blah. I'm like, well, it's the both and. Let's just be honest here.
You know what? When something's really symbolic in the Word of God, it's blatantly symbolic.
Correct.
You know, and if you are left with is that symbolic or is that literal? The answer is yes.
Right.
It is. I would say that it's usually the both and.
Remind me to mention something about symbolism of giants in our own lives,
Yeah.
and why I was like, that's actually not bad. So I'll come to that in a little bit. Let's come back to that.
All right. So Proto-Evangelion.
Yes, Proto-Evangelion, which is Genesis 3:15, where the initial rupture happens between humanity and the rest of God's family, which is the fallen, not necessarily just the Watcher class, but definitely the Watcher class is involved in that.
To break down what Proto-Evangelion is, because it's very interesting, because when you read the scripture, at first it doesn't sound like what it is. Proto means first. Evangelion is where we get the word what's the word? Evangelical.
Evangelism. Yeah.
Evangelism. But it's the good news.
Mm-hmm.
It's the first promise of God, declaration of God, and it's actually good news for us,
Yeah.
even though it doesn't sound like it.
Yeah.
Evangelion. Oh, that's where I was going. It's where we get the word gospel from. It's a root.
Yes.
It's the root for gospel.
Well, that's actually the
Or it
word.
shares the root with gospel.
If I'm imagining it's probably the same thing in Latin, but in Spanish, that's literally the word we use for gospel. Like the gospel is el evangelio,
Yeah. it makes
evangelium,
sense.
right? And actually, I always got this vibe from the word proto. Proto actually means primitive, so it's still kind of in its amorphous stages, which is really
That's
important
good,
to think
too.
about, right? Like it's still a moldable concept
nice
or
depth.
happening.
There to
Yeah.
to the concept.
Yeah, exactly. So we see, and as all things, we see kind of God's plan and the way things play out as time progresses. Like it starts to make more sense. You know, I'm sure you've had that happen in your own life where you look back and you're like, oh, that's what that was. Oh man, I didn't see that coming.
Right.
So that's where we start. And that really takes us forward to, because we're not going to waste time getting back into this. We've already covered this on a previous episode many times.
It's one of my favorite topics.
It's a great topic. I agree. From there, we really branch out into Genesis 6, and it's always,
Oh, hold on.
always
Do
helpful to
Genesis
read that.
3:15.
Do you want me to read it?
Yeah.
Okay, let me do that real quick.
I always like.
It is really good, and I'm going to read this in our most beloved of versions, which is the ESV, the
English Standard Version.
English Standard Version. It says, I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your offspring and her offspring, which can be seed, is actually the word seed in the original. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel. Yeah.
Crushing snake.
So from the very get-go, as soon as there's a rupture between God and man, there is an immediate it's the whole redemptive proto-evangelion story. That's why it's called the proto-evangelion, right? Because you have the rupture, you have the war, you have the redemption, and then you have the coming restoration.
Right.
All of those things.
Like right away. And I really like that God wasn't caught by surprise.
Of course not.
You know,
Why
he
would
was
he be?
like, oh, here's the plan.
He's like,
I've had it written out from the foundations of the earth.
which is very offensive to some of us, because you're already getting into a position where you're like, why would he allow for this crazy thing to happen? Right? I mean,
Dude, because of love. You cannot have can't have love without free will. You can't have it.
I agree.
And
it's not a complicated thing to me. Some people really get hung up on it and they're not satisfied with that answer, which is fine.
Well, because in our modern understanding, we think that good is pleasantness, is comfort. All things work together for the good of those who love the Lord, called according to his purpose.
And sometimes those things suck.
A lot of times they suck.
Yeah.
Because good comes out of growth, and growth is usually difficult.
Extremely.
Think of, is it Peter who says, count it all joy when you face trials of many kinds, because trials produce perseverance and perseverance. Yeah.
So on and so forth. Produces faith and does not
helps you to grow up into a godly warrior or shield maiden for the Lord.
Got that word on the brain right now. Yeah, and so we really see that, and I mean, it doesn't happen right away, but the Bible, you don't read very far before you start to see where that seed war has taken flight
immediately.
And the way, obviously Moses is the one that we all believe wrote these first, the Pentateuch, right? The first 5 books of the Bible.
Or at least put them together and did the verbal rendering of them in such a way that it could be passed down verbally until somebody finally
was able to
wrote it on,
put it into
some papyri,
put it on scratch paper. So we come to Genesis 6, 1 through 4, and that's pretty much where we start with this whole giants thing. And I'll just read it. It's easy enough to read. It's 1-4. When man began to multiply on the face of the land and daughters were born to them, the sons of God, it's very important. The sons of God is a title for an angel class. The sons of God saw that the daughters of man were attractive. I imagine they were. And they took them as wives, any they chose. Notice that they chose. The women did not choose.
Yes.
Then the Lord said, my spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God.
What?
Whenever, where are you looking at?
No, oh, the version you're in doesn't say whenever, it says when. But a lot of the versions say whenever the sons of God came into the daughters of man.
And they bore children to them. These were the mighty men of old, the men of renown. And you can get into the muddy waters there about mighty men being Gibborim, and that doesn't mean that they're giants, but they're Nephilim. I mean, they're Nephilim.
Well, and that is what the word in Latin translates to giant.
Gigantus, right? Which is the word
correct.
in Greek. That's
Correct.
what the Septuagint says. So, I mean, we should probably, give it some weight there.
Go with what,
And,
the 70 agreed upon.
Exactly. I'm glad you mentioned. That's exactly what I was about to say. There were 70 renditions by 70 different individuals, and everyone took away the same exact translation that these were giants. Okay. Now we're coming to a point where it's a little bit easier to kind of flesh this out some. These are pre-flood giants.
Right.
That's what they were called. That's why they're called the Nephilim.
Right.
Specifically why
well,
they're called
because
the Nephilim.
they were just half-breeds at this point. They were just
precisely right.
half angelic,
right
half
in the middle.
human.
Right.
And there are accounts, extra biblical accounts of them being like ridiculous height.
Yeah.
Like 3,000 feet.
Like redunculous, as we would say.
Like enough so that the next time you're looking at a mountain range and it looks like a giant has been petrified and become a mountain range, maybe
it is. Maybe it
I'm not saying it is, but some of those maybe.
Cool. All right.
So, Ricky, that's the only place, though, that the Bible talks about giants,
so
right?
Pack it up.
We're done.
And they were
Good
nuked. No reason to continue forward with this topic. We're not going to call this June for Giants or any of that crap. Good night, guys. No, there's tons of references in the Bible. This is where we really see the culmination, right? That's the reason that everybody mentions Genesis 6, because this is a pre-flood world.
Yeah, the world of megaliths.
Yeah.
And giant
everything.
Stone circles.
Giant trees, giant everything.
Well, really giant everything, because even if you look a little bit back in Genesis, I'm going to assume it's 5, where we get, and Adam was 135 years when he begat Seth, and Seth was 65 years when he begat Enosh, or whoever his next son was.
That generational chronology.
Right. We know that they were living just a smidge under 1,000 years, just a smidge.
It's relevant to say here, humans were bigger too.
Oh, I'm sure.
Humans were way bigger.
Absolutely.
The
Earth was different then, though, too.
David Paxton really makes a good reference here about the expansion of hell, which other people have certainly commented on in previous times. But the expansion of hell is such a big deal because it makes us think about in what way did the earth grow on the inside, right? Definitely the outside as well, but for the inside to grow or to increase, that would require an expansion or a release of something coming out of the earth for it to expand in that way. Something would have to be displaced in the middle of the earth for the exterior to be enlarged.
But that would be cataclysmic.
What do you mean?
Like,
you mean like the greater dry what is it? Hypothesis? No,
not even. It would have pushed the continent apart into
Oh.
pieces, and it would have caused mountains and valleys and massive displacement
It's true.
of Earth via the water that would come up from the deep
Uh-huh.
if there was an expansion,
Yep.
an inner expansion. Benny on Friday night was showing us some videos about.
Benny's the CTDW pastor, guys,
He
by
is-
the way.
He is. What'd you call him?
CTDW pastor. He's not a
He
pastor.
is our
He's a
pastor.
pastor. He's a pastor.
But it was talking about how everybody looks at the Grand Canyon and billions of years and millions of years, and
Which guy? I
A
mean, which
slow
could be
trickle
sure,
of
sure
water.
could be.
the thing is when I was 10, here I go with the story in a roundabout route. I went from
We love our
Northern
Shelley.
California to Washington State.
Hmm.
I was 10 in 1980.
Wow.
So
I was not born in 1980.
in May of 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted.
Oh
I
wow.
went in June. It erupted.
Giant month.
I did. It erupted twice in May. And then as I happened to be flying back, because I only stayed like a weekish, I got to go see Spirit Lake at the bottom of Mount St. Helens.
Oh, cool.
I was 10, but I can tell you the devastation. There were just these dead tree trunks, like big old sticks, just like some standing up,
Lodged
some
there.
lying over,
Yeah.
logs floating in the grossest, murky ash and dirt infested water. That's what Spirit Lake looked like when I saw it.
There's definitely some spirits.
It was so close, so shortly after the eruption that I just remember I was kind of surprised. My mom was like, and it's still dangerous here, so we have to be really careful because the sediment in the earth was still settling. But like what had once been nothing was now mountains. What had once been mountain was now way smaller mountain, sides of mountain blown away. It was cataclysmic, and it happened so fast. There was glacier there underneath the little bit of earth mantle, a little bit of crust of earth, and with all of the debris from the volcano, it settled over this and it melted the glaciers really fast, and so there would be little steam
Geysers and stuff.
And so it vastly changed the face of the terrain. As a matter of fact, I'd like to see some 1970 maps of the area, and then some 1981 maps of the area to see the topographical changes.
Topography,
then.
right?
But it happened immediately. It wasn't long and drawn out.
Right.
And when I was flying back, I got to see the third eruption from the airplane.
Whoa.
I mean, we weren't like close. It wasn't like lava. It was like ash and smoke.
Shelley had like cameras in her face
right.
that she was
in 1980. Yeah,
Right.
that's a ticket.
Yeah, well, I meant like these kind of cameras, but, movie cameras.
But it just the cataclysm that caused that change is the same type of cataclysm that caused the canyons all over the world, not even just the Grand Canyon. But it was just really interesting that the cataclysmic but I thought that was cool. And for me, I'm not even getting to see the before and the after, just the aftermath.
Right.
To recognize that cataclysms
are instantaneous.
Cataclysms.
Right.
They cause massive upheaval and instant destruction and instant change. Like instant change.
Right. Yeah, no, that's good. That's really good.
So there's my story of Mount St. Helens.
Yeah, I mean that's good. That's good because that gives a really clear picture of the restructuring of Earth, right? I mean, that's a really good picture of what it's like.
Before and after. So if you have people who ask, well, how come there were other giants? Didn't God finish the job with the flood?
Yeah.
And my answer is he did. He
Right.
finished the job with the flood. He wiped out
There's
there's
a huge component here, by the way.
there were
that's
no
really going to be worth
sneaky
talking about.
giants hanging out in the Arctic Circle or deep down in the bowels of the earth. No giants made it out, as far as I believe.
That's what you believe. I see.
I don't believe that some snuck out. I don't believe,
Do
like
you-
you said, that it wasn't Ham's wife on the boat.
That I don't. That I really don't buy. But do you think it's possible that some could have gone off world?
I don't know. That one I don't know. I want to be like, no, but I don't know.
But I don't know.
I don't know. I mean, I guess it's a possibility. Man was given dominion over the earth, not over
The stars
off
from the
earth.
heavens.
Yeah, that is not something we've been
I
given
have
dominion.
a huge. I mean, I don't want to rabbit trail too much on this because it's a topic I really am interested in. But so a lot of people don't believe that we've been to the moon, and that's fair. I mean, that's fair to feel that way. But I don't believe we went to the moon when we did go to the moon, or at least not the way that it's expressed that we went to the moon. Now, it's possible. I'm not saying it's impossible. It seems unlikely, though, given a lot of the really weird idiosyncratic things and nature of the way that the moon landing is framed and how did they record it and blah, blah, blah.
Definitely seems to be enough data to raise doubt.
Yeah, right? Like
5 years ago, I'd have said, well, duh. Of course we went to the moon, but enough stuff has surfaced to make me go, I don't know if we went to the moon. But I'm not saying we did, and I'm not saying we didn't.
I'm convinced that we did go.
There.
I'm convinced that we have gone. I should say that we have gone. But I don't necessarily think it was in that spaceship. And here, let me get to my point. The reason I'm mentioning this is we're talking about potentially being off-world. And
Right.
you said that, that the heavens are not our abode.
Right.
The earth is our abode.
Right.
I really wonder, because this is a whole topic, but, this comes back to portals and thresholds, altars, all that stuff.
Right.
So when we pass the threshold of our heavenly planetary body to another planetary body, or even subplanetary, right? Like the moon.
Right.
Like, what's happening there? Like, we're the ones that are entering into, you got to wonder what's happening there. And you got to wonder also, well, if we don't have dominion there, right? And that's where God gave them dominion. Well, doesn't seem so far-fetched to me.
Right. And the whole thing of him interchanging the angels with the heavenly hosts, with the stars.
Right. The way the ancients thought of all that stuff too, right? Like, it's super relevant.
Right.
Anyway, we won't rabbit trail too much on that. So, whether or not you believe how it happened, there's very clearly, when we get past the initial flood stage, there's a change in the makeup, in the genetic makeup of the giants. Like, it's very clear that there's a change there.
Well, there's a change in everything. Where I was going with the man living almost 1,000, with mankind living almost 1,000 years, so did everything else.
Right.
There are so many reptiles that never stop growing until they die.
Good point.
And when people are like, dinosaurs, well, did God make them? Did he not? I believe he made them. I believe that they were old reptiles that just kept growing.
They got reptired is what they did.
Well, they got reptired at the flood anyway.
Well,
R.I.P.
So, we that's a good point. I'm glad you mentioned it, because after the flood, right, after a cataclysm like that, it really changes the entire dynamic of the earth itself. And we've talked about this on previous episodes as well, right? Like, if you were to expand the earth, I mean, theoretically, you're going to have a very different atmosphere. You're going to have a smaller atmosphere as well, right? Like, it's going to be
grow smaller biologics on it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. It's not going to be able to sustain such large life. And because you're not going to have anywhere to go up with, right? There's nowhere left to go if you run out of space, basically.
Yeah. So what you're saying is if you have a 2-story house and you decide you want to raise your ceilings
Mhm.
downstairs, then the upstairs rooms is going to be shorter.
Exactly. And I think that that's one reason. I'm actually not convinced it's even necessarily the main reason, but I think it is one of the reasons, definitely, that we begin to see different types of giants. But
That's good. I hadn't thought of that point. For me, I was just thinking, oh, now you're quarter breed. Now you're
because it's not just the
16th
giants, right?
breed,
Like
or-
it's not just
right,
it's the trees, it's the fauna, it's the humans, it's
Right,
the animals,
right.
like the entire. I mean, that's why we don't
It's
have.
the flora. I mean, there were ferns that were way bigger. We have
Yeah. Oh yeah.
fossil record of much larger
Way,
ferns than
way
we have
bigger.
now.
And so that I think that really is genuinely part and partial of the curse, right? Of having to reset the earth, so to speak.
Right.
But the other thing is truly the deleterious. This is another thing, right? The deleterious mutations in humanity that are slowly wearing
Right.
out the genome, right? Very slowly, I will say, but fast enough to be a big deal, and that grows exponentially. And
Right.
so, as you're seeing more generations, for a lot of reasons, we're getting sicker and sicker and weaker and weaker. There's other factors, of course, but we're not. I'm not trying to tackle every single aspect. But there's really one key component here that I think is possibly the most important. And I don't think it's exclusively this way, but I think it's largely this way. And I actually kind of feel, let me get to my point, but I really, really feel actually, this is actually kind of what I believe more, that after the flood, most of the angelic hosts dare not try that again.
Oh, absolutely. There was never again a coalition of 200.
They were not like, let's do that again.
I'm pretty sure the word of the conditions in Tartarus got around, and ain't nobody wanting to go to God's version of Alcatraz.
No, especially with a weak Earth the way it was, right? But also, maybe not exclusively, but I heavily lean this way, that I think that the interaction post-flood was much more humans seeking out this knowledge and this power.
It's possible, like Gilgamesh.
Right, and that's really what we see, right? We don't see, because if you read the word, right, it says that the sons of God saw the daughters of man, but then thereafter, it was Gilgamesh and it was others that were seeking this kind of knowledge out.
Here, I'm going to throw a little bit of fly in your ointment. Corinthians tells women to cover their hair.
It's true.
That is true. They cause the angels to lust.
Yeah.
Paraphrased, but pretty much.
Well, that's not wrong.
Sum.
Well, I am sticking to my guns, though, and saying I don't think that that's the major portion of interactions now after the flood.
I think that
it certainly has.
That road goes both ways.
Well, it does, but I think that humans realized that they were going to, if they wanted this stuff, they were going to have to seek it out now. And I say that because the original Nephilim, the pre-flood Nephilim, became demons.
Right.
And so they're going to try and get that access to that knowledge directly, right?
And there's two things to say about that, because you make my brain work.
That's why we're friends.
One is any angel who is willing to turn on God probably does not care about his offspring's
well-being.
Yeah, well-being. I was going to say eternity, but we'll go with well-being.
Any
much
of
at
it.
all. And two, that made me think, I wonder what portion the demons, the dead Nephis, actually have in, shall we say, making a match, being the matchmaker.
Like setting it up.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, I don't see why not. It's
a new thought birthed right here today on this show.
See, here's another thing too, right? And this is just something me thinking about it too. But we're very comfortable, I think, and this is in my mind. Maybe your mind doesn't work this way, and maybe you've already thought this through. Which, if that's the case,
Right.
But
Come talk to us.
but-
when you smell
right.
it.
right, well, maybe Shelley's already thought of this. But if you follow us on the Divine Council at all, or if you've listened to us for any period of time talk about the Divine Council, you'll know that we talk, and this has really restructured my brain. We talk very constantly about levels within society in the heavenlies, right? And that's a big deal. But we don't often talk about the idea of levels of demons themselves, because demons are different. They're different species, really, altogether. They're different
Right.
species, right? They are Elohim because they're spirits, but kind of the end of it. That's the only similarity they share with anything else, except some DNA, if we can call it that, of angelic hosts, right? But if Big Dog Watcher and Low Level Angel do the same kind of incursion, right? I would think that their offspring would be viewed the same way, with higher and lower levels, and possibly and potentially, right, higher and lower powers.
I would say that makes sense to me.
Mhm.
It makes sense based on all of our stories
Right.
that we have.
Right. Exactly.
Until one proves himself to be a hero, a man of great renown, or
You're talking about Gilgamesh?
spirit of great renown. No,
Nimrod?
just whomever. I think that there is a hierarchy.
Mhm.
I definitely do agree with that. And I think there's a lot of infighting to work your way up
Certainly.
the ladder.
Certainly.
I think you could have been born a son of Hermes, but you whooped the son of Saturn's butt,
Yeah.
and so you
Yeah.
ranked up.
Yeah, certainly. I think that that's definitely an aspect of it, right? I mean, that clearly that's the way it works. If someone's doing more of the work, they're going to get more of the bounty, right?
One would think, yes.
Um,
Although one would also imagine that these beings would cheat and manipulate and lie and steal and
We're gonna
do
have
everything as maliciously bad as possible against one
Absolutely.
another. There's no honor among that type of thing.
no honor among thieves, right? That actually is something that we're going to cover in a Divine Council devotional very soon. That's something that's been near and dear to my heart for a little while now. So anyway, I forgot why we got onto that subject or where we were going with that.
We're talking about the newer ones being smaller.
Right. And the interactions, and you said kind of
Right.
matchmaking and all that. Yeah.
Right.
So I think that a lot of that plays into it, right? Like the angelic hosts themselves got bigger fish to fry than just what the puny humans are doing. I'm sure that we're important, but they're not nearly as interested as in the small fry type of thing. If you ever read Screw Tape Letters, this is a really good example here, right? Like, you got one demon that's over Screw Tape who's trying to manipulate and keep his human
Miserably preoccupied.
yeah, his human project. There we go. That's what I was looking for. His human project busy. But the demon that's above him is not just worried about him, his cousin Screw Tape. He's worried about many other things that are going on, but that happens to be one of them.
No, his cousin Wormwood.
Wormwood is Screw Tape is the demon that's
On the grounds. Right. It's been a few years
bothering.
since
He's
I've
the one
read
that's he's got the human as the project, right?
Right.
And Wormwood,
And
is
is his
basically his boss.
uncle.
Which I had not registered that C.S. Lewis had named him his cousin. I'd never put two and two together as to why.
His uncle.
Well, Wormwood is his uncle, and then his nephew, then, right?
Was
Screw Tape.
is.
I had never put two and two together that there was the offspring line. That is very interesting. Familiar spirits all together.
I read it when I was a kid the first time.
Yeah,
So
I read it many years ago. Anyway, I recommend that book. It's really good.
you too.
But
You
it
cannot
really.
borrow my copy though. That's right. Ricky could borrow it.
I've got a copy at home. You should buy it if you guys don't have it. You can probably find it for like $2 or something.
I think it might be one of the free
It probably is.
downloadables on Audible, to be honest.
Yeah, or on any place, you'll probably find it. Anyway, that's just a really good example of the dynamic of hierarchy and class play, class interplay between the heavenlies, just like we have that kind of stuff here on Earth.
Well, and isn't it funny that we know they have that, and that's what's always foisted upon us as well?
Hmm. Of course. Well, I mean, we see it time and time again, right? That this one enlightened being comes and teaches us civilization and teaches us how to be
Right.
civilized. And it's, isn't it funny how civilization always requires the blood of children or the innocence or the murder of children
The
or
inequality of people in whatever form that takes. Yeah, my
right.
shoes are bothering
It's
me.
always the same stinking thing. How you're good. Anyway, but when you said that, I was thinking in particular of the Aztecs who came to be civilized, and to be civilized, they had to give blood on a regular basis.
Yeah, it's
Had to be
not much
virgin.
different
Had
in
to be virgin.
America.
Yeah, well, not much. So anyway, that's what we're really looking at with the difference, and I think you make a good point about how clearly there's a potential temptation for angels to come down, which is a
I
very
think so.
weird thought, but
That's where I think most of these other incursions have happened.
if we didn't say this, by the way, I mean, I think you guys gathered, but angels and humans are where the Nephilim come from. They're where giants come from in general. You need some supernatural DNA mixed with human DNA to get a giant in any capacity. I mean, that, there has to be something happening with gene manipulation of some kind for that to happen.
Now, caveat, we are not saying humans who have giantism are Nephilim. We're not saying that Andre the Giant was a Nephilim.
Although he could have been. No, he wasn't. I don't think he was an Nephilim.
Human gigantism
Gigantism?
in humans usually results in a very short life,
Yeah.
brittle bones. It's a different thing.
Enlarged heart
Lest
and stuff like
anybody,
that.
yeah, right.
Mhm.
Lest anybody
Think that we're talking about
misunderstand.
gigantism. Yeah, I know that's not where we're going. Just because you have some sort of mutation in your body does not necessarily mean that you're a giant. And to further stress this point, I mentioned at the very beginning that we already, as generations progress, that we have these deleterious mutations happening
Right.
on the regular in our body, which is a sign of the times, quite literally, that we're dying, that
Right.
that the human race is
Oh, we live in a fallen
extinguishing,
world that
right?
what
Slowly
is it?
extinguishing.
That second law of thermodynamics is in full play.
Yeah. That
Entropy.
eventually entropy wins, right? Given the fallen state of reality. So that really, I think that there's an interplay, but I think largely today, I think that angelic hosts are much less emboldened to come and try and take women for themselves so readily and easily. And I think they've
Not
learned
without bearing some really good gifts.
exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying. Not only that, but they also need permission, right? Which is a huge portion. I'm not going to get into that. It's such a large thing.
Man, but
It's
we really
ginormous.
need to talk about permission.
Well, we have to talk about it at some point because it's almost unavoidable. But I mean, it goes back to what I was talking about. If we go to an extraterrestrial planet, right?
Got you.
That's what I was
we
going.
Put ourselves under their subjugation.
Exactly.
Because they are the ruler there.
Exactly. And so if they give us permission, then we're subject to what they mandate.
And then if they hitchhike back with us,
gives a whole new meaning to Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, doesn't it? So we really see that for all sorts of reasons that the Nephilim do come back, and I think personally the way that they largely come back is because they entice men to seek them out.
I think that's a possibility, and with not with Gilgamesh, with Nimrod.
Yeah, same difference.
True. That is. And like my brain has a hard time separating them.
Yeah, well,
the name of Nimrod instead of Gilgamesh.
We have this kind of incessant obsession with Judifying everything and not including the entire corpus of history as one thing, right?
Right.
When we have lots of people living together contemporaneously, it's hard to think about those humans existing at the same time. So I get it.
But one of the extra biblical writings, and I don't
the
remember, I'm
biblical?
thinking it's Jasher, maybe,
Which what are you thinking of?
where Nimrod finds
Oh,
old script.
no, you're thinking of Noah's grandson in Jubilees, where he finds the
Is it?
writings.
Is that who it is?
I pulled it up.
Ah.
I knew where you were going. This was going to come up. So this is the Book of Jubilees. Let me see if we can find it. Yeah, I think
Look
it's
at you
Jubilees
already
10.
there. Wowee.
Yeah, I have it fresh on the brain, man. Let's see if we can find it. Hidden Knowledge, Jubilees 8 is it might be.
Well, it might be because the hidden knowledge, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'll have to sum it up real quick here because I don't want to bore everyone to death while I look things up. But it's essentially that Noah has some hidden knowledge and he writes it down and he hides it.
Oh, was it written down by Noah? I thought it was written down by watchers.
Oh, it was. You're right. It was written down by watchers.
Okay.
But for whatever, I don't remember why he comes into possession of it. Noah comes into possession of it, and he like buries it. But then Noah's grandson goes and uncovers all of this stuff that the watchers wrote down. And so that is, I really believe that that's a huge component of how giants started showing up on the earth again.
I think that's where the whole allure with magic is.
Certainly.
Certainly.
I mean, no
because
doubt.
That's what Nimrod wanted to do, right? And so he became Gibborim or Gabor.
Oh, here we go. This is really good. This is a follow. This is kind of a summary. In the Book of Jubilees, Cainam, also spelled Kenan, is depicted as being afraid to tell Noah about what was written on the stones by former generations, and air quotes here, guys, if you're listening only, because the content of those writings contains knowledge and prophecies that could be troubling or distressing. The writings likely pertain to the fate of humanity, the events surrounding the flood, and the moral failures of early generations. This is a summary, of course. This is not exactly what it says. Which Noah, as a righteous man, might find deeply concerning. Cainam had read about the sins of his ancestors, impending judgment, and the consequences of those sins. He might have feared that Noah would be angry because the revelation contained in these stones could imply a failure on Noah's part. That's a really big imposition there. Oh, this is a bot. That's why. You got to have those bots, the spirit bots, telling you what to think. Noah's own lineage, or suggest that the flood was necessary judgment due to the pervasive wickedness of humanity. Additionally, the knowledge of such grave matters could lead to tension between blah, 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 blah. Really, that's a lot of hearsay. As I remember the writings themselves, it's very clear that they are the useless knowledges that the watchers gave to mankind. They were written down on these stones, hidden away, and then Noah's grandson doesn't want to tell him that he doesn't want to tell Noah that he found them.
But he wants to find out more about what is on it.
Right, exactly.
And then you've got Nimrod a couple of generations later figuring out how to become Gibborim, 2/3 Nephilim.
And that's a big deal. Right. Well, because it's particularly weird because the pre-flood giants are half breeds, literally, on both sides. Right. They're not 2/3. They're not 1/3. They're half breeds. They're literally half breeds.
And then if you break that down, they might be a quarter.
Right.
Yeah.
16th, an 8th.
The math with a mom, with a mother and a father each time would keep you in an even split. Which would imply, right, that, and if we look at Genesis chapter 11, what would it
the Tower of Babel
in my brain is that a third entity entered into this.
Precisely. There was some sort of I don't know. There had to be some sort of ritualistic magic going on. There had to be something like that going on, because that's not something that you achieve,
right?
Agree. On your own. And that really, I think, is kind of where we start to see signaled post-flood. Like, we really see that signaled as us reaching out to the gods, because that's what Babel is, right? The gate of the gods. It's what it literally means. There's the gate of God.
Right.
We were
But,
trying to reach heavenward, and
to make a name for ourselves
correct.
by taking your name.
Correct.
Is the implication from the
right,
scriptures.
subjugating
Right.
essentially, right,
Right.
to our own will, bending and twisting, if you will.
Good old witchcraft.
You guys can go back actually and check out that episode that we do talk about the power and the Tower of Babel, and
then one of Nimrod. I think that.
yeah,
was a
we did one
separate
of. There was
right?
actually really good 3 set. After we finished the Watchers, we moved on to talking about what a ziggurat was, what the Tower of Babel was, and who Nimrod was, and really we broke a lot of that stuff down really well. Go back and listen if you're interested. That was a really good conversation. I should probably go back and listen to that.
Yeah. I'm gonna have to go back and re-listen as well.
What did we think? What was I saying? So I don't. Is there something
But
you wanted
now
to
that
cover
we've touched a
besides there?
tiny bit of the incursions,
Yeah. So I can't completely say that it's just us reaching upward, because there are clearly incursions, and the verse you mentioned in Corinthians is really, really important. I had forgotten about that actually. That Heiser highlights that women are to be modest so that they don't try and
catch the eye of
get a
of
hookup.
a wayward angel.
Right. Yeah.
No
We'll leave
angel
that.
no
We'll leave that.
more.
So that they wouldn't
Right.
be, as they say in Spanish, happy-eyed. So it were.
I don't think Duolingo's going to teach me that one.
No, I don't think it is either. What is there something you wanted to touch on before we kind of move forward to
let's
the
go ahead and
class of giants?
Let's talk about those other giants, because I think where we were just going is that the newer ones aren't as big as the older ones.
They're not, but there's a lot of them, and I think it probably behooves us to look these.
I like it when
scriptures
people
up.
are like, "Oh, that's just one place in Genesis 6."
Except it's not.
Except that.
How about Numbers 13, verse 33? How about this? This is when they go to scout out the land of that God had promised to his now reclaimed people for himself,
Right,
Israel. The 12 spies.
Sends out the 12 spies, including Caleb and Yeshua.
Okay, so I'm going to read a little bit farther back in Numbers 13, starting at verse 25. It says, "At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land." Bear with me, guys. I know this is a little bit long, but it's really, really, really sets the stage well. "And they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, 'We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit.'" By the way, that fruit was ginormous, guys, if you guys read that again. "However, the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negev. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea along the Jordan. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, 'Let us go up and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it.' Then the men who had gone up with him said, 'We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we are.' So they brought to the people of Israel a bad report of the land they had spied out, saying, 'The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are of great height. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak, who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them.'" Yeah, that's a pretty clear picture to me that these are the descendants of the Nephilim. Now, that's a really good point. There's another one. Again, we mentioned that the Nephilim are half-breeds, right? And so the sons of Anak, if they came from the Nephilim, then they have to be direct descendants from the Nephilim, which would imply that there are some sort of further incursion, if not because they call them the Nephilim. I don't know. That's
Right.
a weird. That might just be a weird linguistic thing going on there, but I don't know. It might not. Regardless, there's giant blood in this group. That's one of the ones we see. Is there anything you wanted to comment on this here?
Well, not even just in the people, but the fact that they bring back one bunch of grapes
Ginormous bunch of grapes.
on a pole held by two men, and they're grapes. And you can put them in your pocket; it'd be squishy and messy, but they're grapes.
Right.
So that kind of a grape
They're grapes.
means that there was some genetic manipulation going on by the Anakim
Yeah.
in the area as well,
Yeah.
which is why
Because it was right. Because they mentioned the size of the food because that was now. And I mean, you wouldn't mention that unless that's unusual.
right,
Right.
it's highly unusual,
Right.
and that's why Yahweh tells them to totally destroy everything, even burn the fields,
Nuke
get
the
rid of
Nephilim.
all of the genetically manipulated plants, animals, people.
Mm-hmm. Burn it all. And let God sort it out, quite literally. Yeah. So then we also see in Joshua, I'm just going to pull it up just for mentioning's sake. We don't have to stick here long. According to the commandment of the Lord to Joshua, he gave to Caleb the son of Jephunneh a portion among the people of Judah, Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron. Arba was the father of Anak, and Caleb drove out from there the three sons of Anak, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai, the descendants of Anak. He went up from there against the inhabitants of Debir. Oh wow! Now the name of Debir formerly was Kiriath Sefer. It's just a kind of an offshoot here, but Debir, if I'm not mistaken, means abandoned place, which is an interesting kind of tidbit there. So anyway, we're starting to see more and more of these things where there's giants all over the place, and if you notice the wording, I think that this is where it's kind of a double-edged sword, but people say, well, there was no real giants, these were just large men. The Bible intentionally kind of just lumps in evildoers, I guess we'll call it, or non-followers of Yahweh with giants. It just kind of lumps them all together. And so, every once in a while there's a mention because it's important, right? I was just commenting to Shell about the Egyptian giant,
Right.
that one of David's 30 mighty men basically had a club, stole the giant's spear, which was like the size of like an oar, basically, right? A big old piece of wood, stole it from him and killed him with it.
Right.
Dude was 7.5 feet tall by approximate heights and stuff like that. But the crazy thing here is that it says that he wasn't even like mentioned among the most mighty of men,
right.
which is
he
like,
wasn't even in David's top 3 dudes. He was just in the top 30.
Right. But why would the Bible go out of its way to mention this random Egyptian giant? Like, why not just say he was, this really tough champion and that's the end of it?
A great warrior or whatever.
Right. You can't go with Gibberim forever. Sorry, guys. It just doesn't work. Is there anything else you want to touch on this? I mean, we could go on to the Zamzummim, the Rephaim, Goliath, Og of Bashan.
That's where I was going to go.
Well, let's go to Og then.
Because they're just tall dudes.
You know what? Let me make these scripture references, and you guys can look these up for yourself. Deuteronomy 2:10-11 and 2:20-21. That's the Emim, the Zuzim. Yeah, there you go. Goliath, obviously, in 1 Samuel 17. Obviously, go reread that. It gives tons of details about how big he was, how much stuff weighed, how much this and that, how much of a threat he was. The size of his spear, his shield, his sword, his armor, its weight. I was very happy my pastor was talking about that, by the way.
Yeah.
And the Rephaim, that's where we want to go, though. This is King Og of Bashan. So why don't you go with that, Shell? I'll let you lead the charge.
Well, just the main thing I just want to say about King Og is that we have the dimensions of his bed for good reason.
Yes, absolutely.
It's in the fact that it is made of iron.
Mm-hmm.
It is 13 foot long, 6
Here, I'll
is
find.
it
I'll
6
find
or
that.
9
It's
foot
humongous.
wide
It's like
and made of
stupid big.
iron so that it can support his bulk.
Yep.
To support his weight. They're not tall people, just regular, just bad humans. And it's a sad state of affairs when we can't read the Bible and accept what it says, but then still expect that the author of said word is going to actually resurrect you. If you cannot believe when the Bible says a giant is a giant, I mean, I know it's weird, but if you can't believe that, do you really believe that you're going to be resurrected?
Mm.
Do you really believe that Jesus has saved your soul?
It's a good question. 3 verse 11. That's what you're looking for of Deuteronomy. It's talking about places that were conquered. There's Mount Hermon. Look at that.
Oh yeah, Hermon's always in the middle of it.
So this is right in the middle. I think this is Joshua speaking, if I'm not mistaken.
You say it's what's the
Chapter 3, verse starting at verse. I'm gonna start from verse 8.
Did you say Deuteronomy?
Deuteronomy, yeah.
Okay.
It says, so we took the land at that time out of the hand of the 2 kings of the Amorites who were beyond the Jordan from the valley of Arnon to Mount Hermon. The Sermonians call Hermon Sirion, while the Amorites call it Senir. Senir. That's so. Oh, you know what? I was going over that episode with Tim, the alchemy one, and he pointed out. I'm glad he mentioned. I watched it because Senir is the same place, if not the same place, very similar to the name Shinar, where they may have been in the valley doing all their weird stuff, their shenanigans. Sorry. So the Sidonians called it Hermon, Amorites called it Senir. All the cities of the tableland and all the Gilead and all Bashan, as far as Salikha and Edrei, cities of the kingdom of Og in Bashan. For only Og, the king of Bashan, was left of the remnant of the Rephaim, that's post-flood giants.
Right.
Behold, his bed was a bed of iron. Is it not in Reba of the Amorites? 9 cubits was its length, and 4 cubits its breadth, according to the common cubit. That's insanely large.
Common cubit is about
18 inches. So we're talking. So even if it was just 9 feet, so it's 9 and then a half, 13 and a half feet. You're looking at about 13 and a half to 14 feet length. That's insane.
Then about 6 foot wide.
Whoa.
I mean, my bed is 6 foot wide.
And you know, I don't know if you remember this, but
it's because we sleep in a queen size bed. So.
Troy
Brewer
talks about this and makes mention of the fact that this was Nephilim sex magic, is what it was. That was the purpose of having this bed. This is where the altar was, and this was likely for, I mean, all sorts of reasons, but certainly for the reproductive quality of continuing the Nephilim bloodline, right? Or the Rephaim, or whatever you want to call it, right? Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to.
The hybrid.
Yeah.
Bloodline, one way or the other, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Did we hit everything?
I think so. You know what? Would you just name the various giants that are listed?
Certainly.
By name.
I'm going to get as many as I can. So we have the Nephilim, obviously. We have the Anakim, the Amim, the Rephaim, the Zamzumim, or the Zuzim, also known as the Zuzim, Goliath, who was a Philistine, and at very least, his 4 brothers.
Right.
And then we also have tons of other giants in Canaan. You have tons of giants all over the place that I can think of off the top of my head. I'm trying to see if I have any other ones here that are listed.
You had Og, Sidon, or Sidon.
The Amorites.
I thought that they named.
You know, if you notice in Lebanon, they talk about the giants and they make reference to them as giant cedars, although those could be actual giant
cedars of
cedars as well.
Lebanon. The one
Words
that
there.
Benaiah
Oh, right, the
killed,
Egyptian one.
his
That's what you're thinking
name
of.
is given as well, isn't
I
it?
think it's just Benaiah who he doesn't mention the name of the
The Egyptian.
but I
giant.
will I'll read it because it's really freaking cool. Benaiah when he kills the Egyptian. It's in 2 Samuel 23:20 to here, I'll read it there first. 2 Samuel. And this is talking about David's mighty men, by the way. This is what I was mentioning a while, just a little bit ago. And Benaiah, the son of Jehoiada, I can't even say that name, Jehoiada, what a hard name to say, Jehoiada, was a valiant man of Kabzeel, a doer of great deeds. He struck down 2 Ariels of Moab. I can't remember what that. I think it was like kings is what it had said in a different version. He also went down and struck a lion in a pit on a day when snow had fallen, casually. He struck down an Egyptian, a handsome man. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but Benaiah went down to him with a staff and snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. This one actually doesn't say it, but it actually has his height. I don't know why it didn't mention it, which is very weird, actually, it didn't mention it.
Right.
Or that might be in First Chronicles and that it mentions it instead. 11, I think it was, what they just said. 11:22. He struck down an Egyptian, a man of great stature, 5 cubits tall. And this is 5 times 18. So we're looking at 5 feet and then half, 7.5 feet. Yeah. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand like a weaver's beam. And if you guys know what the beam is, that's actually where the beam that spins to allow for weaving, which is, I mean, you're looking at a massive thing, like crazy, crazy huge. The Egyptian had a spear in his hand, but Benaiah went down to him with a staff and snatched the spear out of the Egyptian's hand and killed him with his own spear. This is crazy, just because it's crazy to mention. He was renowned among the 30 of David's mighty men, but did not attain to the 3. And David set him over his bodyguard. So this dude, I mean, the supernatural power that God gave the Israelites is wild.
It's interesting because there are some people who speculate that David's men of renown were also
giants.
Gibborim.
Well, I mean, there is the portion where David flees from Saul, pretends to be crazy, and he goes into, I think it is the land of Canaan precisely, and they let him live and fight among the ranks.
There's
which makes you wonder, like,
in the House of David, which is a good series, at least this first season that they put out, that Danny and I watched it. They did a good job of making the giant look like a giant and not making the men look small, although they do have David as being a bit puny. But the Bible tells us when they would sing their songs, they would say that Saul is head and shoulders above the rest of the men, but David is bigger even than Saul.
Yeah.
And so I don't think
That's
David
weird.
was some puny little.
No. But I also don't think he was like tons of muscle mass.
I don't either. But he was something because he had already killed a bear. He had already killed a lion.
Oh, and he also says that he beats them to death before, like, if they don't let go of the lambs, that he'll beat the thing to death, which is wild, with his bare hands.
So there's something.
Crazy kid.
I think I have never seen David portrayed in any movie or series as I see him in my head, because I think he was much more of a big burly man than some svelte.
Well, he was definitely a redhead. It says he was ready.
Does it say no? Saul was ready.
No, I'm pretty sure it's David.
I don't know.
Anyway, we'll look at it. But anyway, so one thing that I think would be cool next episode, and I don't know if you want to touch on this. This is totally fine. We can. But one thing I would like to touch on next episode is, are hybrids redeemable?
That's good. According to Nathan Reynolds, they are.
And according to some historical accounts, they are.
And he has some really good
versus.
Well, and theologians who have written on this topic before him,
It's something we
and
should look
so,
into.
It's definitely something 2 years ago I would have said nay.
Yeah, no,
I
it's
would
a
have said
hard.
no. They're irredeemable.
And just to maybe lay some groundwork. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
No, you're good. I was just gonna say, but now I
It's
don't
hard to
feel
know.
that way.
I don't necessarily either, and I'm going to tell you why. I think that it's good to think about it this way, and we're not going to give away too much because then you what's the point of the next episode? But we will think about it, right? You are brought into this world with no volition of your own,
Right.
right? You were not a preconceived being, or you were not a
This is not your
pre.
second or third.
No, that's not what I want to say. Is like not that God didn't expect it, but like it wasn't his will. Like it wasn't his perfect will for you to exist, right? It's not like a human being that God wills each one of us to exist or creates,
But also
another angel, so to speak.
nothing like if you
Nothing
really-
escapes God's
nothing,
purview.
Nothing.
I don't think there's a word that I can really come up with off the top of my head, but what I mean to say is,
You didn't want to be born that way,
yeah, but also like God wasn't surprised by it,
right?
but he also doesn't condone.
Right.
He doesn't condone it. That's what I'm trying to get at.
Yeah, God never winks at sin.
Right. There you go. But I will say, it's very hard for that to be the case if you're born as a creature that lives to hate, manipulate, and destroy. Like, it's very hard for you to come to a place where you can feel repentant, right?
It's like the question of, wasn't it mean of God to harden Pharaoh's heart?
Wasn't. So it's a good question.
I think Pharaoh made his choices, and God is the sun. And depending on the kind of clay you are, you'll either melt in the sun or you'll harden in the sun.
You also have to ask yourself, was Pharaoh actually a Nephilim?
No, I mean, probably, at least inside. According to what he said about himself, he told me, I heard him.
I know.
What he said about himself
He's
is
sly.
that he was Ra.
Right.
He is Ra. He is the god. He is descended from Osiris.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
Indeed, Pharaoh's
his bloodline
claim direct descendant from the gods.
I'm just saying, after his army died, he was probably real raw. That's how he felt about it. Anyway,
I think he cared less about his soldiers and more about the fact that both his wife and his son died.
Well,
they were both
good point.
Firstborn
Progeny, right? But also, like, he didn't have any more fighting power. That's another reason to be really pissed about it. And of course, God would kill Pharaoh's army with water. Of course, he would. Anyway, well, I don't have anything else for this episode. I think we're
pretty good.
Yeah.
Eventually, we will get to the American giants.
You know what?
And I'm not talking about the New York giants.
Their mascot should clearly be a Nephilim, right?
That's where George Washington was, though. He was in New York when they uncovered the 7 foot tall, 7 foot tall, I guess I should say that part of it, giants.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right? Oh, is that where the New York Giants comes from?
We ask ourselves. I mean, it could be an allusion to the really high towers, or I don't know, but
man, how blind are we, and how much of it is willful?
Yeah. I mean, I agree. There was one thing I want to mention. I think we're gonna have to save those for next one because those are really
definitely.
Good.
No. Well, this will be.
But there is something that I want to touch on just super briefly here at the end. Remember, I told you that about a kind of a not like a figurative aspect of the giants and how we apply that kind of thing to our life. I was thinking about it today. I really hate when people say that they're fighting the giants in their life. And I'm like, oh. And then
I had to get up at 4:30. I was fighting my giants.
the giants face me when I get sick or when I'm just like, oh. But then I thought, well, wait a minute. We actually are still fighting the giants. We're literally still fighting the giants. They're demons now.
True story.
But they're the same creatures that were. And so I thought to myself, I go, wow, we literally are fighting giants. That is so weird. But I almost wonder also if that's why it became a figurative phrase in the first place, because we were fighting giants. And so it's like, well, we started to compare that figuratively to actually fighting giants. But if you think about it, we are continuing to fight giants. So when you say, I'm fighting my giants today, well, yeah,
So
you
make
are,
sure
or you should be.
Suit up.
Right?
Suit up.
Interesting
son.
thought. Interesting thoughts. Interesting
Yes.
thoughts with Ricky and Shelley.
Oh,
So I can't believe we finished this quick. Maybe it's because
I
we're in the
know,
same room.
right? Or because we're both desperately tired. Poor Ricky has had almost no sleep at all.
I was supposed to drive. Whoa. I was supposed to leave, guys. For those of you that are still listening, I don't know why you're listening, but I was supposed to leave here to El Paso Monday evening at like 9 p.m. and I was supposed to get here just before 10 because there's some time change. It's about an hour and 40-minute flight. So I was like, great, cool. I'll get there just before 10, get into my room, blah, blah, blah.
We'll settle in before midnight. All right.
The entire watery reality of the skies fell out of the sky and like totally stopped all movement. And so I had no choice but to just sit there till like 3 in the morning. And I didn't get here until I didn't go to bed until about 5:30 in the morning this morning. So I didn't sleep very much, you can imagine. It was fun at times. But anyway, well, I guess that's it, dude.
I think that is it. So
do you want to do the Aaronic blessing?
I do.
Do it.
The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. Our Lord turn his countenance towards you and give you his peace. Perfect peace.
Amen. And we say, as always,
Shalom, shalom.
God bless.
Oh, you're right. It is. God bless.
Shalom, shalom.
And Maranatha, guys.
We love you guys. How cool to be in the same room. How weird. Thank you for watching this episode of the Christian Theological Dark Web Podcast. For all questions, collabs, or comments, contact us at solo.to/thectdw or the Christian Theological Dark Web at gmail.com. To become a special access member or support our ministry, sign up on Spotify or Patreon. This has been another Four Dragons production from the CTDW. God bless, shalom, shalom, and Maranatha. Come, Lord Jesus.